Just leave it.
Okay, there we go. So, usually when we do live things, I always like to warn people just so that they know what that's going to be. But this will be recorded, so I can take out anything I need to take out. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Brianna?
I just wanted to let you know I won't be able to make it to practice today.
Good.
Because we have
Okay.
a wedding to go to.
Thanks for telling me. But next week is an optional practice, so it'll be great to see you. I'll get you a disc though. Okay, so we are in Genesis chapter 30. This is a weird section. I spent the whole time going, what in the world? Why is this even in the Bible? What is the purpose of these two chapters? And by the end, at least by the end of this morning when we had our discussion, and by the time I had done my prep, I think I've got a good idea why it is here now. So now I feel better about it. So you guys see what you think. It's a little bit odd. So just as a reminder of what we've been doing, we've been in Genesis. Brianna, we started at the beginning of Genesis, and we've been going through. And then today we're in chapter 30. We're starting at chapter 30. Mm-hmm.
Chapter 30 and 30.
Chapter 30 of Genesis, and I forget the verse, I'll tell you. It's going to be around verse, I think it's 25.
Mm-hmm. I have the Bible up on my phone.
Okay. So, what's been going on so far? Before we start this, remember that Jacob has been 14 years, Jacob has been 14 years hiding / running away from Esau, right? Mm-hmm. So at first he was just, I don't know whether you'd say he was running or hiding or getting away from. They made a good excuse for it, right? But he was away from Esau. While he's there, his name, Jacob, means deceiver. And lo and behold, who did he fall in with when he gets to where he's going? Laban. The king of deceivers. Yeah. The one most practiced, an artful deceiver. And now Jacob has been having to deal with Laban. So isn't it interesting that God would have Jacob land in the place where Laban is at? It makes you wonder if God isn't teaching Jacob something. I think probably we all feel God is always teaching, right? So I guess the real question is Jacob learning the lesson. I'm not sure. Let's take a look at what happens here. 14 years, when he works 14 years for Laban, what were his wages? His wives.
Yeah.
What chapter are you at?
7. I haven't started reading yet.
Oh, all right.
So Don, when he was there 14 years, what were his wages? 2 wives. 7 years for one, 7 years for the other. Okay, so what belongs to him? Nothing. The wives and the children belong to him, and he is eating and living there, but he doesn't really own any of that. It was all for them, right? Now, part of this culture that we need to make sure we understand is that the bride price was paid by Jacob's work. Now, that might have been okay for Jacob when he was running away from Esau and he had nothing. Maybe that works out fine. But most of us don't realize what that means to the wives. The bride price belonged to the wife, not just the man. And if the man died, the wife would have the bride price to live off of. That's the only thing they had to sustain themselves. It was kind of like a security or an insurance for Rachel and Leah, that if something should happen to Jacob, they had the means with which to do what they needed to do. Otherwise, how would they? How would they take care of themselves? So when Jacob works for Laban and they don't get their bride price, Leah and Rachel lose also.
Bride price.
Right. There was like a customary gift, like when, what was the name of that servant that took the 10 camels up bearing all the gifts for, was that Rebecca? And gave Laban the gifts and took
like a dowry?
Yeah, a dowry. It's the bride price. It could be money, gold. It would be something, and it would be what the bride would have if something should happen to the husband. Brianna?
Are you saying that he has to pay for his wife?
Well, what happened is that Laban, who was the father, Uncle Laban, would, when he gives Rachel to, or when he gave Leah or Rachel to Jacob as a bride, he would have also given them like a dowry or a bride price. And usually it would be some gold. It might be some gold statues, like,
So basically basically they're saying that he does
7
buy
years of service.
the wife.
But how often do you have to pay that price, though?
well, they worked out a deal because Laban is a real flim-flammer. Jacob's a deceiver. He's a flim-flammer. So they work out this deal. Okay, we'll work out this deal. I'll work for you for 7 years, and then I'll get, he wanted the younger wife, right? But then Laban tricked him. He married the older wife. So he said, well, after the bridal week with that wife, you can go ahead and marry the second one, the sister. You can go ahead and marry her. And then you just work for me another 7 years. So 14 years he's been working.
got one he really wanted in 14 years.
That other one, she gave him a lot of sons, though.
Yeah.
He might not have liked her, but he got a lot of sons from her. Okay, so I'm bringing this up because something's going to happen in the story next that is embedded in that cultural idea. So if we understand that concept, that Rachel and Leah were due something from this. They lost between the trickiness of their father and the trickiness of the husband. They lost because now they have no insurance, no security. Now it doesn't matter so much where they are now because they're living in their father's place with their so of course if something happened to Jacob now, no big deal, right? Because the dad would take care of him, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, but look at the headings coming up. You can see Jacob's going to move on. And that's where this whole idea of the bride price and the security of the women comes into play into this situation. Okay. Okay, so are we on verse 25, chapter 30? Verse 25. Ready? After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." Now what's that about? I've learned by divination that the Lord. This is a society that has many gods all around, all kinds of things they worship, right? And so he's saying that he talked to the Lord, the God of Jacob, the same God he's talking to by divination, which tells you the kind of character that Laban is.
Yeah.
He's just trying to say a God that meets Jacob's criteria, right? Whichever one, if Jacob were worshiping some other God, he'd say, "Well, I talked to your God, Eber," and he said, right? It's just a manipulation that he's using here. He added, "Name your divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." And he added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." So he's saying, "I'll pay you wages." Verse 29, Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" Verse 31, "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future Whenever you check on the wages, you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored, all will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." Okay, now, spotted and speckled and all, what is that all about?
They weren't the perfect ones, but didn't they want like,
Yeah, but the
For
fur-
sacrifices, it
Yeah.
had to be a perfect breed.
Yeah, yeah. So the pure colored ones would be the ones you would want, right? That you wouldn't have, and Jacob may not have known. He may not have been a scientist, but he spent 14 years watching the animals breed and seeing how things work.
more speckled than pure?
You would think, right? Because you would think that would then spread. But the truth is, it's the opposite.
Is it really?
The dominant genetics is for the sheep to be white or gray,
Oh.
and for the goats to be, let me see, would be black and brown, I think it is. So let me read this to you, what I found out. Jacob may not have known genetic science or Mendelian tables, but he certainly knew from experience that the recessive genes that cause sheep and goats to be streaked, speckled, or spotted occurred in 25% of the animals born in the first breeding season, 12.5% in the second season, and 6.25% in the third season. So as the animal gets older, there's less and less chance. So the younger animal, mature animal that's ready to breed, would have the greatest percentage. Jacob was careful to breed only the strongest and most vigorous animals, and it just so happens we know from genetics that the strongest, most vigorous animals are most likely to have the recessive gene. Selectively breeding only the streaked, speckled, or spotted animals over a 6-year period would produce a large number of those animals. If you want to know more about that, that's from Yehuda Felix, the Israeli expert on plants and animals in Scripture, and it's in his book, Nature and Man in the Bible. Here's a quote. "The animals looking at the peeled shoots of poplar, almond, and plane trees need not have anything to do with pregnant females." We'll get that later because we're going to talk about how he does it. Okay, so you might think, most people think that it would be common to have the streaked animals or the spotted, but that's actually the recessive gene. So if in a normal herd with no, calculated breeding, it would be in about 10%. It always remains about 10% of a herd. And then one of our people in the earlier class said that he talked to a shepherd, and one of the ways they would count their sheep is they would leave a black sheep among each 100. And in that way they could count the sheep quickly. Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting.
Yeah. You got to figure, Jacob's no dummy. We've seen him make some pretty crafty deals and do some wheeling and dealing. He's a crafty character. He's been sitting around watching sheep breed for 14 years. There's certain patterns. However, there's also something else we might look at. Look at chapter 31. We're just going to read one verse, verse 10. Actually, 2 verses. Look at chapter 31, verse 10. "In breeding season, I once had a dream, in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, 'Jacob,' I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land.'" Now, who knows about this Jacob character? He lies all the time. Later, he mentions this later when he's talking with Laban. He mentions this to the other people. But is that why then back here when he's dealing with Laban that he strikes this deal? Or is it because he just is very knowledgeable, has been watching, he's smart and cunning, he's been watching the sheep breed and he knows how it works? We don't really know, because we certainly can't trust Jacob. Right? We really don't know. So let's go back then to our story and see how it all folds out. Starting at verse 37. Oh wait, I'm sorry, verse 31. No, we're at 35. That's where you read 31. 35.
Yeah.
That same day, he removed all the male, who's he? Back up to 34. Agreed, said Laban.
Yeah.
Let it be as you have said. That same day, Laban removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his son. We're on verse 36. 36 now, chapter 30, verse 36. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. So he's figuring that if he takes all the speckled and spotted, then they won't breed. And he puts 3 days distance, so there won't be any accidental mixing up of things, right? So obviously Laban doesn't know what Jacob knows. Or does Jacob know it? Is he just doing it because that's what God told him to do? It's hard to know.
What did they do with all the flawed sheep?
They go to Laban. He would give Laban the ones, and he would keep the good ones. Verse 37. Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches. This is not about them looking at the branches and turning speckled, or looking at the branches and so they have striped or speckled. This is about they could not see the other sheep. So when the strongest of the herd were the first ones to the trough and they were in heat, they would come to the trough and mate with one another, pushing the other weaker ones aside. And then they couldn't see to the other side to go over to get distracted or go to the other side. They would mate right there on their side of the trough. It isn't that they saw something speckled or saw something striped and turned that color. It's that prevented them. They stuck it in like this so they couldn't see. They would go up to where those reeds were.
Tricky.
Very tricky. So now did Jacob just figure this out? Or did God really tell him this? We still don't know that. Let's keep reading. Verse 39, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself, and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. In other words, it became a sign. Come over here for his animals, they would come over here to get the water, and they would be together, and his stronger animals kept getting stronger, and he kept scooting the weaker over to Laban's flock and keeping those flocks separate from each other.
They were both stinkers.
Yeah.
When you're connivers like that, how do you even know who's on the up and up?
Yeah, really.
Verse 42, but if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones went to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and maidservants and men servants and camels and donkeys. So, I'm going to make sure I don't skip anything.
Sneaky man.
Yeah, it's sneaky. Chapter 31. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything from our father owned and has gained his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Now, isn't that interesting? So it really sounds like maybe Jacob is actually having a relationship with God, right? That's what that's sounding like. Verse 4, so Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. Now, why would he call him out to the flocks? Laban and his guys are not there. So he's talking to them like privately among the sheep. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. Jacob is getting a taste of his own medicine, isn't he?
Yeah.
He connived Esau, right? But now that he's been taken advantage of, he's feeling it. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. Again, we see him having a relationship with God. If he said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. Now, here's what makes me feel suspicious. Do you hear what he's saying to Rachel and Leah? He's saying it's God's fault. God has taken care of your father's livestock and has given them to me. It's not that I've taken them. It's not that I've smarted him out of it. I'm innocent. I didn't do it. It's just that God, God did it. So that's what makes me wonder whether the next part is really a sincere thing or another part of his deceitfulness.
Where are we at?
Because he's trying to say
On
God's
chapter
the
31, verse 10. Right. Chapter 31, verse 10. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Remember, Bethel was down here when he left, and he came to Bethel. He had that encounter with God where God spoke the promise to him, right? And then he went on up to Haran, and that's where he settled in with Laban. So now his family is still down here in this area. His other part of his family, the ones that hate him and were going to kill him. But when I say family, I mean loosely family. Okay. Where are we at? Verse 14. Okay. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? In other words, if you leave Laban, what about us? You didn't get a bride price for us. We have nothing. Their only insurance before now was they were still living in their father's land and that he would care for them if something should happen. But they're saying, what about us? If we leave here, we have nothing. Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. In other words, you're like treating us like we're not even your family. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated at Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Why? Why?
So she would have something if Jacob died?
Yeah, she's been keeping house in Laban's tents and all that. That's her father. She's thinking, well, at least I'll take these idols. I'll take them. At least I'll have those to bargain with. That'll be some gold for later on, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. I'm sorry. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, and crossing the river, he headed for the hill country of Gilead. And that's what we have circled here. This is the hill country of Gilead. And you can see it's very near to Bethel where he had been before. Now there's a problem in this because in the passage it's going to tell us that that Jacob left, 3 days later, Laban realizes that he's left, and then Laban comes running after him 7 days. So they're like 10 days altogether down this path, but that won't get you here. Remember when we did the story with the 10 camels and they were bringing it to go get Rebecca for Isaac's wife? When the servant Eleazar took 10 camels loaded with gifts and all that and went up. That was the bride price, right? Remember we talked about that's like a 30-day travel. It's like a month. You don't go, and we're traveling with flocks, and they're traveling with flocks and kids on feet. They're not riding a bunch of camels, I mean, like that other was. So you're talking about 30 days. So most scholars don't know how to resolve that. It could be that hill country is kind of a broad term, so perhaps that referred to some other hill that we aren't familiar with that's near. Most scholars believe that no, this was the hill country of Gilead, and that the idea of 3 and 7 is like Jewish culture does a lot. They use numbers as, like if you say 3 days, you really mean a short time. They'd been gone a short while, and then when Laban chased after them, it took him much longer. It took him a while to catch up with them, so it's a longer time. And so some people feel like that's what it is, but I don't really know. So, and it seems to me the scholars not really sure either. Most of them believe it just means it took a little while and then a longer while because they've not found. But you know, here's what happens. Archaeology is a relatively new science. I think archaeology is like 70 years old. It's a new science. And they're finding stuff all the time, you know. And there's been times when something like that, there's a discrepancy, and they'll find someplace called the hill country of Gilead 10 days away. I mean, that's happened in other times. So it's hard to know when we read something like that. You go, well, I wonder, you know, what that means. So it could mean that they are using the numbers as a general thing, or it could be that there's actually another place that they called the hill country of Gilead at that time. So.
But then couldn't that go back to the fact that Laban was going to keep his herds 3 days away from Jacob's? So if Jacob decided to take off, Laban couldn't possibly know about it until at least 3 days later.
Yeah, that's probably why he got a good lead on him, because he was distant. Take a look at we're on chapter 31, verse 22. On the 3rd day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Now, this isn't that I did a divination and God told me something, right?
No.
This is God himself talking to Laban. I imagine that was shocking. It must have been very shocking because you can hear in the way he's talking, and the next part where he gives his little speech, it sounds like he's trying to be really careful what he says. So you listen, if this doesn't sound like a speech you'd give after God warned you, don't say anything good or bad. I'm warning you. Okay, here we go. Verse 25. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of tambourines and harps?" Yeah, I doubt it too. "You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night, the God of your father said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Is there anything he could hold against him?
No.
Only that. You can't hold him anything about anything else.
No.
Nothing else could he hold against him, right? But he could that. Verse 31. Jacob answered, Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, he shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there's anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods.
Just wondering about that.
So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two maidservants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, but I can't stand up in your presence. I'm having my period.
Jesus, good excuse.
So he searched but could not find the household gods. So just as a parenthetical or just information for you, I always was curious about how ladies took care of that problem back in the day before you had stuff, paper items that you could use. And my grandmother, McMahon in Arkansas, she happened to be around, and I asked her one day, and she told me that when she was young, you would use rags. And she said we had certain rags, and we would wash them. You always knew when someone was on their cycle because you'd see their rags hanging out on the line. And I said, well, wasn't that hard? How'd you? She's like, right. That's why you don't move around much. You kind of stay still for a while because you can't really, it's hard to get anything actually done. And so when I read this later as an older adult, I'm going, okay, I get that now. I understand that now. You're using rags, you don't have products to use. And so she used that as her excuse, and they excused it. In case you want to know, later in Leviticus, I have the thing for you. Leviticus 15, verses 19 to 23. It becomes law that when a woman is in her cycle, that she's considered unclean, and it actually gives details of what to do for that time. I thought that was interesting, but that's not now. Remember, this is all pre the law being there. So later on, that law comes into place. Okay, so now we know a little bit about Rachel's character. Verse 36. Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. What is my crime? Of course, when was he angry? After he didn't find the idols, right?
Yeah.
So then Jacob says, what is my crime? He asked Laban. What sin have I committed that you hunt me down? Remember, this is not by themselves. They have an audience of their whole family. Yeah. Everybody's around watching this. So it's not like, it's not a quiet conversation between two guys. Everything's being done with the witness of the whole family around. Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of my relatives and your relatives and mine, and then let them judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment for me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac have not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you.
Well, if I was him, I'd go back to the naked date.
I know. These guys, though, are such characters. They're both just a couple of flim-flammers, and you can just hear it on both sides.
Yeah.
He makes his big speech after they confirm there's no idols anywhere, right? Verse 43. Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet, what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, and you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. In other words, everybody's taking your side. So what can I do? verse 45. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. So having a meal at this marker is like establishing this covenant. Laban called it Jegar Shedutha, which means heap. And then in another language, Jacob called it Galid, which also means heap. Jegar Shedutha means heap of witness, and Galid just means heap. Or you could call it a mound, or mount is a pile of rocks. Verse 48, Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Galid. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. You might have heard this verse quoted from King James Version. It sounds like, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent from one another. But that's not really the way this is being said. We take that out of context. Let me say it to you in context. In context, it would be, may the Lord watch my back when I can't see you. So it makes you think different of, like, I think I have a cross stitch with that phrase on it. Oh well. Verse 51, Laban also said to Jacob, here is this heap and here is this pillar. I've set it up between you and me. This heap is a witness and this pillar is a witness that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and then he left and returned home. Problem. What's just happened for Jacob? This sounds all in good. We're going to separate. I've got my stuff. Yeah, but
Did he lose his wife?
his wives are with him. His kids are with him. They kiss. They've made this marker that neither can go one way or to the past that marker. Where's he going to go?
Yeah.
He came out of that land on bad terms.
Yeah.
He doesn't know.
He just promised not to go back anywhere else.
And now he's promised, he's cut off his back door, right? So now he's coming down toward Esau. And he doesn't know what's happened with Esau. He doesn't, he's been out, he's been gone. So now he's going to come back into the area and we'll see what happens with him. So Jacob, what do you think? Is he turning good? Is he starting to get it?
I don't know.
I think he's just taking the, how would you put it, the best course he can. But,
It's hard to tell, right?
yeah.
We know that his name is going to be changed. He's going to wrestle with God. And after he wrestles with God, God's going to change his name. Instead of the deceiver, Jacob, he's going to be Israel.
He's listening to God now.
You think so?
He's gonna what?
He's listening to God now. God's telling him what to do.
Oh.
See what
Wait,
happened.
anyway.
What happens is we saw all of his deceiving practices, right? And he's still kind of tricky. So now when he says God told him, we're going, did God tell him or is he just using that, you know? But we saw it a couple times, right? Where he said that God told him this or God told him that. So now we're like, what's happening? Is he changing? Is he learning the problems of being deceitful? The problems he saw because he experienced it with Laban. He met his match with Laban. And look at all the things that occurred because of that trickiness. Is he learning it? I think we learn things that way. We don't learn it like this, right? Like if you lie, You might lie and you lie and you lie, and pretty soon you get caught a few times, and pretty soon you start realizing I really shouldn't lie, right? And if you're a Christian, of course, you never lie.
It's those other people in that other church.
Oh, the other people.
They're horrible.
So Jacob must not have been a Christian because he was a deceiver. No, well, there was no Christian then, but do you know what I mean? Like, we need to recognize that Jacob is growing a lot like we grow.
Yeah.
And we have these core things that are problems with the way we think or how we do things, and God takes time to change them. And we might be 80 years old, and God may not be done working with us on stuff. I kept praying that God would show me, how do you have faith? I don't understand, like when you say, be faithful. How do you have faith when you don't know what to do next? If you know what to do next, then is that faith? Because you're just doing what you know how to do. So what do you do? How do you get, how do you take the next step? And I just learned that. I'm 61. I just learned that this year. I learned this year what that is. So when I don't know how to build a school, but we're building a school down there. I don't know about construction, so what's the faith? The faith is that I say, okay, the air conditioning goes there and you need this conduit for that, and I just listen and I participate and I go ask the people that know, and I come back and I step up again. Yes, no, we want to do this and do that. I don't know what I'm doing. Next thing, okay, yeah, the sewer line has to hit that, it needs to be this many inches or that many inches and go here, there. Okay, perfect. When do you need to know that? And then I go and I check and I come back and say, okay, we want the 3-inch blah, 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 blah. Step up. That's the faith.
Taking the next step even when you don't know where it's going sometimes.
If you know where it's going, that's not faith. The faith is stepping up. The faith is when I have a task that's completely overwhelming, I don't know how to do it, and I just say, okay, I've just got to start it, and it takes an hour, because I had everything I needed, everything fell into place, it takes an hour, I'm done. I feel like it took 10 hours. I go, oh, this was exhausting. It's only been like an hour, I still got a whole day to go. But that's faith. I'm learning that that's what faith is. It's not knowing everything, it's be willing to step up to what you don't know.
Like Abraham and Noah, both of them. I mean,
Yeah,
they
didn't
went
know how to
places
be, yeah.
that they didn't know where they were going or why. And Noah, God said build an ark. He started building it. He didn't know where he was going. Was there water?
And what has Jacob relied on until now?
His cunning and wits.
Cunning and wits. He's gonna figure it out, right? He's gonna jump and jive and twist it, and he's gotten burned by that. So he's learning. So we, like Jacob, are learning, and we have to struggle with the things we're learning, whatever it is. And we never stop. Don Luce has something that God is working with him on. And he may have learned the lesson that God had for Don. Don may have learned that when he was 50. And now he's got a new lesson when he was 60, and a new lesson all the time as we age through this life. God is teaching us the lesson that he has for us. Maybe it's a lesson of living without your spouse. What a difficult lesson that has to be. Sort of. Sometimes I think that might be good. No, really, we have things like that we come across in life, and God teaches us and grows it. Maybe it's recovery from cancer. Maybe it's whatever it is. Maybe it's dealing with your mom who's got dementia and lives away from you. There's so many struggles in life that we have, but God is working us and teaching us all along the way. Whatever it is, he's growing us up. So if Brianna wears a cowboy hat, and I don't like a cowboy hat, oh boy, then I should just, then what's God going to work with me on?
He's intolerant.
Who cares about a cowboy hat, Laura? Really? Doesn't matter. Cowboy hat is beautiful. Looks beautiful on her, right? Doesn't matter. So God's teaching us what matters and what does not matter.
And reminding us not to judge others.
Reminding not to judge is teaching us to love one another. That's what we're doing. Loving each other. Pulling each other forward. So these are hard lessons. Some of them are hard lessons for us. But that's what God is teaching us. What's important, what's not important.
Some of us are real slow learners, because he's had to teach me a few lessons over and over and over.
You're not alone,
again.
Judy.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you hate
And
to be?
and I understand, there are times when I think, good grief, wouldn't you think I would have gotten this by now? And I realize that, I mean, it's shocking to me. I'm not a stupid person.
I know.
He's very patient.
He is patient, and he loves us. God loves us.
Yeah.
He knows just how we are, and he loves us anyway.
Patient like me.
Sounds like Mr. Llewellyn.
Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for the joyfulness of this Sunday. I pray, Lord, that you would bless all these people as we go out and minister. No matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're ministering to people. We're drawing them close to you, inspiring and encouraging people to draw close to you. It's in Jesus' name that we do this work. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Lord.